It all started with a sudden volcanic eruption that no one could foresee. People tried unsuccessfully to escape from the volcanic eruption. They cried, screamed, and called for help, trying to escape the effects of the volcano. The magma was about to reach the vicinity of the village. The guy notices that there is nothing left of the village. All of it has been destroyed by the disaster. He was tormented by doubts and curiosity. What had caused the end of the world? However, it suddenly turns out that the volcano is the least of people's problems. Standing on the scorched and blazing ground and looking at the alien ships, the guy didn't realize if everything was really happening or not. His right eye lit up, displaying all these horrors: the blood moon, the alien invasion, the end of the world. It made him feel devastated. The guy still thought and hoped he was dreaming it all. Another beam of energy shot out of the alien ship and traveled deep into the Earth. After that, the entire planet was covered in cracks and was instantly destroyed. At the same moment, the guy woke up in his bed and jumped up from the bed in horror. The grandfather wondered if his grandson was okay and if his grandson had a nightmare. The grandfather asks his grandson to calm down because his grandfather is near. The guy smilingly remarks that he is only having a nightmare. It turns out that the grandfather was worried about his grandson for a reason because the grandson slept for a whole day. The grandson notes that sometimes it is good to sleep like this. He tries to get away from the nightmare and asks his grandfather what they will eat, as he is hungry. The grandfather was going to feed the kid anyway. The grandfather reminds him that the grandson should go see Dr. Liang after he eats. Since the boy has taken a big hit, the doctor should examine him. The grandfather even wonders if his grandson has heard his admonition, but the grandson assures him that he has heard everything. After that, the grandfather leaves the house as he had to go to work. He once again reminds his grandson to go see Dr. Liang. While feeding the ducks, the grandson once again remarks that he understands everything and not to let the grandfather worry. The grandfather is still worried about his grandson, though, since his grandson is so stupid. As he continues to feed the ducks, the boy himself notes that he knows exactly what his grandfather is thinking. Everyone in the village, including his grandfather, for 16 years thinks the guy is a complete idiot. His parents died early, so he has lived with his grandfather his entire conscious life. The grandfather said the kid never cried. Until the age of 4, the grandson did not talk, preferring to just sit alone. As various gossips spread around the village before the grandfather had to take the boy to the doctor. Dr. Liang suggested that he had mental retardation. The grandson perfectly remembered the expression on his face at the moment when the doctor said the diagnosis. The grandfather's face was filled with pain and despair. Then the boy clearly heard his grandfather's words. He heard that it was even good, because now he would not have to go to school, and there was no need to look for a bride. As long as the grandfather is alive, no one will harm or offend the boy. It turned out that the grandfather was silent at that moment. The boy did not realize whose voice he was hearing at that moment. Soon he began to hear more and more voices. Male voices, female voices, elderly voices, children's voices. He heard someone talking about how the Huang family was not pitied, insulting them behind their backs in every possible way. Meanwhile, the grandson continued to grow, and there was nowhere to go. Who blamed the child for everything? When the boy heard several voices at once, at that moment he realized that he could hear people's thoughts, the voice of their hearts. Later he received a lot of information, not only about people, but also about plants, nature, and the universe. The huge flow of information was not always assimilated in his head, so in childhood he often fainted and fainted. However, as he grew older, he began to adapt. Other people's thoughts still did not leave his head. While passing by a group of people, he could hear someone complaining in his thoughts that he had lost all his money in betting. Although he could still hear people's thoughts, as he grew older he learned to control and discard unnecessary information. However, he had no control over the data he was receiving from the universe. The day before yesterday, he didn't restrain his curiosity and took a look at the moon, where he discovered a horrifying fact. It turns out that the moon is not a satellite of the Earth. The moon is a battle weapon created by an alien superior civilization to monitor the Earth. Hidden beneath the surface of the moon is a hollow structure full of mechanical devices. There are also thermonuclear weapons and kinetic cannons. The most deadly weapon for Earth is the moon itself. Even a slight change in the moon's position can cause tidal changes on Earth to bring catastrophe. There are too many weapons aimed at Earth. However, what worries the guy the most are the two huge figures he saw on the moon. These are the legendary aliens, from whom the guy received important information. The total time of observation of the Earth is 12,831 years, 4 months and 19 days. The discovered advantages of humans, a pleasant odor. It was from exposure to this information that he passed out for an entire day and night. This information affected most of the final scenes in his dreams. He wondered if the scenes in his dream would come true or not. But the guy decided not to worry about it because the aliens had been watching the Earth for so long but had not done anything about it. At least it occurred to him that if the aliens were treating humans like food, then maybe they were. Most of the unexplained disappearances of people in the world are alien-related. Reflecting on this question, he suggests that until some colossal change happens on Earth, the disappearances are likely to continue. It couldn't go on forever, which meant that someday the day would come when the aliens would attack. He wondered when that day would come. And if that day came, what was humanity to do? Even with all his powers, he couldn't make such predictions. He even brushed the thought away because the fate of humanity did not depend on him. He's just an ordinary country boy, so he doesn't want to think about such things. In the meantime, he needed to stop by Dr. Liang's house as he had promised his grandfather. Seeing the huge crowd, the guy wondered what had happened. As it turned out, Dr. Liang had suddenly disappeared, and no one knew what to do. The village chief and the officer went into the medical center, but they still hadn't come out of there. Dr. Liang was always communicating with the villagers, and suddenly she disappeared without saying anything to anyone. Touching the fingers of his left hand to his temple, the guy started to think. He tried to discard the information about the outside world as it could help him find out information about Dr. Liang. After analyzing the information he received, he found clues based on the boot and wheel marks. There were a total of 5 people and 1 vehicle. The time the footprints were left was 7 o'clock in the morning. From the footprints, he began to reconstruct specific information about the object. Soon he notices that 4 people drove Dr. Liang in their car while she was unconscious. He also had time to notice that Li Fan of the Li family was at the scene at that moment. Li Fan witnessed what was happening. Finally, the village chief and Officer Wang appeared from the nurse's station. Village chief asked the officer where Dr. Liang had gone and why she left without saying a word. Officer Wang noted that the door was open, the lock was not broken, there was no sign of a struggle, and no belongings were missing. The doctor did not respond to the family's calls, which means there is definitely something wrong with this case. An officer asks the crowd if anyone has seen Dr. Liang this morning. Someone remarked that when he came to get the medicine, Dr. Liang was already gone. Li Fan, on the other hand, notices at this point that Dr. Liang is probably already dead anyway, so he decides to keep quiet to avoid getting into trouble. At this moment, Huang Ji runs up to Li Fan and informs the officer that Li Fan saw everything. The blonde panicked and said that he never said that. The village chief wonders if Li Fan saw Dr. Liang. The blonde continues to make excuses, the more he doesn't understand how anyone can believe the words of an idiot. Huang Ji then says that he saw everything because his grandfather asked him to go see Dr. Liang at 7 o'clock in the morning. He went out early, but he decided not to go to the doctor yet. And then he noticed Li Fan standing near a tree. The blonde man started to mumble, and his speech became suspicious. The father couldn't stand it, ran up to his son and hit him. The father didn't understand what all the secrets were about, and he told his son to tell everything he knew. Sitting on the ground and crying, Fan admits that he saw Dr. Liang being led away by several people. The father is furious and doesn't understand why his son didn't tell him right away. The village chief tried to restrain the father. Li Fan admits that he didn't tell him because the men were fierce, and the men also had knives. The boy was afraid that the men would take revenge on him. Village chief immediately asks the officer to check it out. Officer Wang immediately called to verify the information. After the phone call, the village chief asks Officer Wang what they should do. Officer Wang informs him that Dr. Liang's parents have also disappeared. The man is shocked because it might have something to do with the doctor's family. Officer Wang did not want to jump to conclusions about whether or not these events are related. He didn't understand why he would go to such a faraway place to kidnap an ordinary doctor. The village headman asked the officer to rescue Dr. Liang, for she was the local heroine. Huang Ji knew very well that these people were now hiding in an abandoned temple on the mountain, less than 1 kilometer away from the medical center. If the guy told anyone about this, no one would believe him. However, there was a need to hurry, as Dr. Liang was already on the verge of life and death. Dr. Liang was like a sister to the guy, so he didn't want anything to happen to her. After reaching the place, he decided that first he needed to find the places where the traps were set up, and then already reveal the location of the doctor. He had a bad feeling because of the information he received. If the police continued inaction, the doctor's life would be in danger. That's why the guy decided to act on his own. The guy wanted to protect Dr. Liang at all costs. When he arrived at the place, he immediately discovered all the traps set up. He jumped on a tree and tore down all the traps that were set by the criminals. It even amused him to tear down the traps, because setting the trap for the criminals was probably very hard. As he lands on the ground, he notices that if he hadn't scouted the situation, the police officers would have fallen into the trap, but now everything was going to go smoothly. At the same instant, he heard someone's voice. He was too close to the facility and was able to hear the voice of Dr. Liang, who was in danger. All 4 criminals gathered around the doctor. One of the men splashed water on the doctor to rouse her. The ringleader of the whole gang asks that the doctor answer where she hid the golden Buddha. The woman admits that she doesn't understand what's going on. After all, they've had the golden Buddha since childhood, and no one has ever told her where it was found. One man can't hold back any longer. He declares that a couple of idiots stole not only the golden Buddha, but also spent 4 million. He doesn't understand how their daughter couldn't have known about such a thing. Dr. Liang informs him that she doesn't know anything, because her parents abandoned her and she didn't get a single coin from their funds. Therefore, the criminals can kill her, only there would be no point in doing so. The criminals do not understand what to do next, because their plan has failed. Earlier, the man thought that Liang worked as a secretary, and if he finds her, he will definitely be able to get to the golden Buddha. Now it turned out that the woman knew absolutely nothing about it. The man asks the other to leave the woman on the street, as it was time for them to run away. The man asked not to blame him, as the girls saw their faces, so they can't just let her go. Huang Ji decides that now is the time to save Dr. Liang. The men panic when they hear a noise, because it seems that their trap has been triggered and someone is coming up the mountain. However, they still wanted to finish the matter with Dr. Liang. Huang Ji didn't like this situation. He didn't understand why men were so cruel. They left him no choice, and Huang Ji decided to pretend to be an idiot to divert the criminals' attention. The man with glasses didn't realize who appeared in front of him. One of the men pointed out that the man in front of them must be a villager. Dr. Liang asks that the criminals not touch the guy as he is sick and does not recognize the criminals. One of the criminals has heard of him. He recognizes him as Huang Ji, the village's famous idiot. Then the boss orders the man to deal with the idiot. Huang Ji starts to bump away, trying to create a ruckus. Huang Ji wonders why the woman is bleeding. The doctor, on the other hand, tries to protect the guy and ask him to leave the place. The boss is fed up with all this and informs the doctor that she has found a companion in the other world and that he will join her. The man decided to immediately follow the boss's order and deal with the idiot. Huang Ji did not wait for his death and decided to counterattack. The man immediately started panting because he didn't expect such a quick reaction and punch from the idiot. The other criminal immediately stood in his place. He didn't realize what his accomplice was doing. He even called his accomplice useless, and that he always had to redo everything for him. He attacked Huang Ji, but the latter easily grabbed the man's elbow. This blow hamstrung his opponent, and Huang Ji easily finished off his opponent. A third criminal intervened, but Huang Ji easily blocked his attack. Afterwards, Huang Ji sent the criminal flying with a precise leg kick. All the defeated criminals were in front of that idiot. The boss didn't understand why his subordinates still hadn't dealt with the snotty youngster. Wang Zhen, standing on all fours himself, didn't understand why his arms and legs were numb and he couldn't stand up. This made the boss stand up and look at the young idiot in front of him. He found the guy in front of him quite interesting. This was the first time Huang Ji had used this kind of ability. He didn't think that it would go so well. He wasn't a fool and understood very well that even as a strong fighter, it was very dangerous to fight with people who had weapons. The men made one failed attempt after another. As long as Huang Ji observed the state of his opponent's muscles and joints, he could anticipate all of his future actions in advance to give the best possible response. After defeating the two criminals, Huang Ji looked at the boss. The boss immediately got into a defensive stance, and he even asked Huang Ji if he was going to attack them. The boss orders the last of the subordinates to attack Huang Ji together. Huang Ji didn't hesitate and immediately ran to Dr. Liang and told her that he found out that the doctor was kidnapped. The woman is shocked that the guy was able to deal with two criminals. She doesn't understand how the guy managed to do it. The boss and subordinate froze at that moment. Untangling the woman, Huang Ji admits that he just threw a couple of punches indiscriminately. He didn't expect the men to fall so quickly. The woman is hurt, and so the guy wants to get her home as soon as possible. The woman doesn't believe it, and there are still two criminals left. She tells Huang Ji to go down the mountain as fast as possible and call the police. The boss and subordinate, meanwhile, decide to seize their opportunity while Huang Ji forgot about them. With a slight duck and a swing of his elbows, Huang Ji easily knocks the weapons out of the hands of the criminals. The woman pounces on one of the men and tells him not to touch Huang Ji. As soon as the man falls to the floor, the woman immediately tells Huang Ji to run away. However, at this moment, Huang Ji twisted the boss's arm. The boss is the most surprised. To him, the guy seems very strange. He originally thought that Huang Ji was hitting at random, but it turns out that his punches hurt a lot. In the same instant, Huang Ji seals the boss face first into the floor, to the great shock of the doctor and the other criminal. Huang Ji notices that the boss is such a weakling because he didn't even use force, and the boss has already fallen down. As it turns out, Huang Ji often does physical work while the boss is mostly sitting down. After so long, the police finally arrive on the scene. Officer Wang orders the criminals to lower their weapons as they are surrounded. Suddenly, Officer Wang notices a very strange situation. All the suspected criminals are lying on the floor, and their local idiot is standing over the boss. The boss even starts crying at this point. He has been preparing for so many years for this moment, he never thought that some idiot would take and ruin everything. Later, Officer Wang put a vest over the woman and gave her a glass of warm water. To be sure of what was happening, he asked the woman if he had correctly realized that she had been rescued by Huang Ji. Dr. Liang confirms this because if it wasn't for Huang Ji's help, she would have been dead by now. The officer wonders what Huang Ji forgot on the mountain. He also praises the guy and asks him not to run away anymore and not to make grandfather worry. Looking at the criminals, Officer Wang wonders if Lu Jingmin is among them. The boss is shocked. He couldn't understand how the police knew his name. After all, he is usually called by his nickname by everyone. Since the criminals don't want to cooperate, then Officer Wang thinks they will be comfortable keeping quiet in the police station. Huang Ji decides to walk Dr. Liang home. She thanks the guy for being there for her and saving her. The guy is all glowing and states that grandfather says that people should act according to their conscience. Dr. Liang smiled slightly at these words and felt that the guy's grandfather was right on this point. This made the woman become bolder, so she called Officer Wang over and decided to give him some more information about the case. In this way, the kidnapping case in Huazhuang village was safely concluded. Dr. Liang told the police all the details of her involvement in the theft from the museum that year. If she had spoken up earlier about what was so troubling to her, the stone would have fallen from her soul as soon as possible. She had decided to get rid of her attachment to her foster parents too. She didn't want anything to bind them together anymore. The problem with the threatening letter that had appeared was also solved in no time. The boss reported that he had written the letter. He confessed that actually, deep down, he didn't like his nickname, so he decided to write his real name. He was forced to, and he had nothing to do with it. Lu Jingming decided to make himself look like a victim to somehow shorten his prison sentence. However, the police couldn't really believe it, because the other accomplices claimed that Lu Jingmin was their boss. However, the boss continued to deny it and convinced everyone that he was framed in the case. Even though the police had their doubts, they still had no other suspects. As long as it pays off, everyone will talk nonsense to reduce their jail time. The police would not suspect Huang Ji, but he did not behave very nicely. A few days later, when the villagers were harvesting their crops, they were distracted by sudden events. The villagers wondered why the police had come to the place again. As it turned out, the police came along with Dr. Liang's foster parents. Most likely, Huang Ji had somehow reported the whereabouts of the doctor's parents to the police. That was what his despicable act that he had mentioned earlier was all about. After that, the doctor's foster parents were led to the village reservoir. The doctor's foster father reported that it is at the bottom. Officer Wang notices that the couple had built up the reservoir before leaving the province. The parents have already explained everything. They spent all 4 million and only had a few 100,000 left. The golden Buddha was hidden in this reservoir. He also asked that Huang Ji pay attention to those who came with the criminals, since those were from the provincial museum. The guy couldn't blindly believe the criminals that they had spent all the money. After taking a closer look at the man, the guy realizes that the man has a hidden deposit, which is $3,150,485. Huang Ji even recognized the specific location of the hidden deposit. The foster father naively thought that he would be able to spend his money after he got out of prison, but Huang Ji was not going to let that happen. Soon a chest was recovered from the reservoir. Upon opening the chest, the experts were convinced that in front of them was a golden Buddha of the Tang dynasty, which had been stolen last year from a museum. Officer Wang doubts that it is a golden Buddha, as the element looked more like copper than gold in appearance. However, the expert assures that the Buddha statue is actually much heavier than ordinary bronze statues. After measuring it, they found that the weight of the Buddha is very close to the volume of gold. Therefore, they concluded that the inside of the Buddha statue is actually gold, but the surface is covered with a layer of copper. Officer Wang also believes that the weight will not lie. Huang Ji check whether this is the case. After scanning with his gaze, he realizes that it is not gold. The density of the Buddha statue clearly exceeded that of gold. The Buddha statue was basically composed of iron, silicon, and some unknown element. It seems that the elements that are not found on Earth are remnants of alien civilizations. And it looks like what is inside the statue is some kind of precision instrument that was delivered by an observer from the moon, and the recipient was an Indian monk. The monk was called Jodasita, and he seems to have been a very famous man. The box with the statue was covered with a lid and was being prepared for transportation to the museum. Other than the information Huang Ji had gotten, there was no further information he could get. If only he could open the statue, then he would be able to get more information then. The aliens had been on Earth a long time ago and had even left their creations behind. But the guy was curious about the aliens' purpose. If humans in the eyes of the aliens are just tasty food, then he didn't understand why the aliens would bother giving Earthlings the products of alien civilizations. After he lost the statue of the golden Buddha, then he was lost to the loss of the keys to solving this mystery. He knew very little about alien civilizations, and in addition, he had a dull no scanty supply of relevant scientific and astronomical knowledge. Because of this, his ability to assimilate information could not be utilized to its full potential. Therefore, if he wanted to continue to gather information related to the alien civilization, he could not stay in the mountain village where he lived. He must send to the big city to get more information. Will he manage to do it, how to do it, and will his grandfather let him go? What do you think of this story? At night, Huang Ji went to a secret place to dig up the money that the doctor's foster father had stolen and hidden. With a little bit of shoveling, the guy found what he came for. In his opinion, no one would have thought that such a suitcase held $3 million. The girl's adoptive father had hidden 3 million yuan not far from the golden Buddha. However, even such logic and counter-logic were completely useless in front of Huang Ji's ability. Passwords were also useless in front of the guy. He easily opened the suitcase with the password and then didn't think twice and just decided to take all the money for himself. Huang Ji realized that studying the information about the aliens would definitely cost a lot of money. Therefore, he calculated that these $3 million would be his initial capital. However, he needed to leave the village first, otherwise he wouldn't be able to spend the money in the direction he wanted. I wonder what the tax office and the police would say to this when a poor guy suddenly spends such large sums of money. Besides that, Huang Ji couldn't let grandfather's disease progress, and if they continued like this without doing anything about the disease, grandfather would die in 5 years. However, there was the most important issue that needed to be resolved. It would be very difficult for the grandson to ask his grandfather to allow him to move to the city, as the grandfather has mistaken his grandson for a seriously ill child all his life. So it would be very difficult for the grandfather to agree to his grandson living alone in the city. In the end, he decided to go to school. Previously, he studied only in junior high school because of his intellectual problems, so the grandfather was very worried about how the grandson will continue to live. The guy decides to tell his grandfather that he wants to continue studying at school. The grandfather himself would hardly be able to take his grandson, but he can ask acquaintances to do it. Huang Ji put all these things off until tomorrow. He pulled the suitcase with the money and immediately fell down. $3 million in cash was heavier than he thought. The money suitcase weighed over 50 kilograms and the suitcase had no wheels. He was furious about this problem because he would have to carry this suitcase for half his life, so he had to find a place to hide the suitcase. In the morning, the grandfather wondered why his grandson was so tired. Huang Ji explains it to the grandfather that he just didn't get enough sleep, although in fact he was practically dragging the suitcase with money until the morning. After breakfast, the guy went to see if there was a man who would agree to take him to the city. Walking through the village, he began to look around at the villagers in the village. Soon Huang Ji sat down on a rock and sighed. He still couldn't find any villagers who would agree to take him to the city. Even Officer Wang, who came from the city, didn't want to go back there. Huang Ji even thought that the city was such a scary place since no one wanted to go there. Suddenly the guy saw the village chief walking by. The guy quickly scanned the village chief since he was in a good mood. Huang Ji liked the information he saw from the old man. A few days later, Zheng Xuan and Su Lingli came to the village, and the village chief was glad to hear this information. The village chief was so happy that he greeted the guests and welcomed them. Huang Ji recalled that Su Lingli used to study in Shanghai and then worked there after graduation. She was a kind-hearted person, so the guy didn't think she would refuse his request. Zheng Xuan, on the contrary, was very suspicious. Huang Ji used his ability to study the information about the man. Zheng Xuan was 29 years old. His main profession was a translator, but he also worked as a hacker. His work experience was 10 years. The global rating was 683. The man also accumulated a good fortune, 70,000 bitcoins, as well as $1 million. The guy was even surprised that the hacker had such an impressive fortune. Huang Ji could gain knowledge and skills by recovering the memory of the object. If he had enough time, he could even learn Zheng Xuan's hacking skills. In 1 second, he could only memorize 1 second of information, which was too inefficient. If it was any key skills, the basic knowledge was not learned as fast as reading a book, so his ability had its own limitations. Seeing the guy, Su Lingli asked him to come over to her and take a seat with them. The girl decided to introduce them and introduced her boyfriend. She even asked Huang Ji to call her boyfriend Uncle Zheng, although Zheng Xuan didn't consider himself old enough to be called uncle. The girl informed her boyfriend that Huang Ji had a mild form of intellectual disability, but it was safe to socialize with him. Zheng Xuan calmly took note of this information. After that, Huang Ji told Su Lingli about his desire to study and then called his grandfather for dinner. The village chief called Zheng Xuan at that moment because there was a problem with his TV set, and Su Lingli said that her boyfriend was good with technology. Zheng Xuan said to rely on him and that he would take care of everything. When Zheng Xuan looked at the TV, he noticed that it was an ancient TV and that there was no other TV like it in the city. He only hoped that there was no hardware malfunction in the TV, otherwise everything would have to be replaced. Huang Ji didn't miss his chance and praised Zheng Xuan for being so cool that he could even fix TVs. As Zheng Xuan examines the inside of the TV, he remarks that there is nothing special about it and that the TV will soon fail again anyway. Zheng Xuan will only extend the life of the village chief's TV a little, but the village chief will still have to buy a new TV. Zheng Xuan wonders where his decoder is, at which point Huang Ji holds out the part to him and wonders if he needs it. Zheng Xuan confirms that he needs the part. After Huang Ji wonders if Zheng Xuan needs the part or not and holds out the part to Zheng Xuan, again correctly guessing the part, Zheng Xuan is already wary and wonders how the guy could know this. Having finally fixed the TV, Zheng Xuan wonders if the guy has ever done TV repair before. Huang Ji shakes his head negatively. Zheng Xuan doesn't understand how the guy knew what he needed back then. Huang Ji notes that he just watched Zheng Xuan disassemble the TV and memorized it like that. However, it all seemed too suspicious to Zheng Xuan because in his opinion, people don't have time to memorize everything in such a short period of time. Even if he took a picture, it is not a fact that he would have understood everything. He even makes the assumption that the guy might have a photographic memory. He decides to test the guy on his abilities. He quickly took the laptop apart, then asked the guy to help him with the assembly of the laptop. Huang Ji agreed and started to assemble the laptop. Zheng Xuan noted that the guy's movements were smooth, and his execution technique was very precise. He would hardly believe that this was the guy's first time fixing something. Soon Huang Ji was holding out the assembled laptop to Zheng Xuan. Zheng Xuan had no way of knowing if the guy was definitely in trouble or if he had genius syndrome. Su Lingli soon dropped by and inquired about the progress of fixing the TV. Zheng Xuan notes that they managed to fix everything, and also that Huang Ji was able to assemble the laptop himself. Hugging her boyfriend, the girl wondered why Huang Ji didn't tell her grandfather about his abilities. Zheng Xuan even felt sorry that such talents were lost in the villages, but he was not at liberty to give any instruction about life. Su Lingli recalled that the guy had told her that he had dropped out of school. She even wonders if he would like to continue his studies if he has the opportunity to study in Shanghai. Huang Ji confesses that he wants to continue studying, but he is not sure if his grandfather will give his consent to do so. The girl asks Huang Ji to talk to his grandfather since the guy has such abilities and he's staying in the village. What abilities is she even talking about when she hasn't even seen anything, and he just assembled a laptop once, and she's already prophesying a great future for him? He had thought this way, Su Lingli would try to help him get permission from his grandfather to move. However, the grandfather was adamant and immediately refused his grandson's offer. The guy was even surprised that it wasn't as simple as he had planned in his head. The village chief also intervened in the conversation and remarked that it was a good sign that the guy wanted to learn and that such things should be encouraged. However, the grandfather is still against it because the others don't know what his grandson has been through. His grandson has been bullied all the time, so he doesn't want to let it happen anymore. Zheng Xuan decided to stand up for the guy and said that the guy is very capable and that he was even able to repair the old laptop himself. The grandfather is also shocked at how his grandson managed to do this, since he was diligent and never touched other people's stuff. Zheng Xuan notices that the guy has talent. Besides, you don't have to study for a long time to succeed, so the guy was lucky. Zheng Xuan realizes that the guy has a problem, but he notices that people sometimes show talents that were not previously inherent to them. So he asks the guy to show it all to his grandfather. The village chief is shocked, because even Wang, the best repairman in the village, could not master such techniques. Huang Ji didn't argue and decided to demonstrate his skills to his grandfather. He quickly assembled the laptop. The village chief was shocked by what he saw. The grandfather also didn't fully understand what had just happened in front of his eyes. He noticed that while his grandson was assembling the laptop, his grandson's face was so concentrated. On normal days, the guy had the same expression on his face and didn't change in any way. It was the first time the grandfather had seen his grandson so enthusiastic about something. The grandfather was so happy for his grandson that he was not hopeless after all, and that he was finally able to find something he was interested in. The village chief even suggested that the guy enroll in a technical school. Zheng Xuan knew of a technical college that offered a 3+2 system. The first 2 years would be high school material, and the remaining 3 years would be devoted to vocational skills. After completing his studies at the technical college, the guy could get a diploma of higher education. The certificate would then not be of use to him, and he would not have to retake the exams. Huang Ji is all glowing with such information. However, the grandfather is still worried about whether his grandson will be able to cope with all this. The village chief realizes that the grandfather is still worried, but he notices that the guy is not as stupid as everyone thought. In addition, the village chief notes that Zheng Xuan and Su Lingli will be with the guy to help him. If the guy can complete his studies, he will be able to get a good job in the future. This was very good news. The grandfather understood everything perfectly well, but he just lacked confidence. After all, Shanghai was a metropolis, so the grandfather didn't fully understand if his grandson would be able to adapt when his grandson had never even traveled outside the village. The grandfather was worried that he wouldn't be able to learn anything about his grandson's condition and problems when the grandson was so far away, especially if his grandson started being bullied again. Su Lingli was worried about the guy and wanted to somehow calm down the worried grandfather. Zheng Xuan notices that he and the lad won't be able to go to school and they won't be able to check. So he felt sorry that the guy would stay in the village like this. Huang Ji told his grandfather that he would listen to what he said, and if his grandfather said not to go, he would not go anywhere. He would always be by grandfather's side and take care of him. The grandfather was saddened by such news. His grandson hit him in the most painful place. He had spent his whole life raising his grandson, but he had not achieved anything good himself. He could not cripple his grandson's life. Other than farming, he had nothing to teach his grandson. Besides, he was worried about what would happen when he died. He was worried that his grandson would be left all alone and would not be able to survive in the world without help. Grandfather wanted his grandson to be happy and not to be bullied. In the end, the grandfather gave in to his grandson's persuasions because he did not want his grandson to be only around him all his life. A grandfather informs his grandson that his grandson should learn something new. Besides, his grandson had a talent for something, so he didn't want his grandson to waste his talent sitting in the village. The grandfather hugged his grandson and gave him permission to leave to study, but asked his grandson to study hard. Huang Ji was so happy that grandfather finally gave his permission. He promises that he will study hard. The guy knew that his grandfather was always worried about him, so there was no way he could let his grandfather down. He even apologizes to his grandfather. Huang Ji swears in his heart that he will study medicine and will definitely be able to cure his grandfather. At this moment, tears welled up in his eyes. Afterward, the guy was going to deal with the alien invaders. After saying goodbye to his grandfather, Huang Ji, along with Zheng Xuan and Su Lingli, took a train to the city. Before long, they reached the city. While at the train station, the guy was looking around because it was his first time in the city and he didn't know what a city was. Zheng Xuan asked the guy not to go far away from them so that he wouldn't get lost. They were going to show the guy where he was going to live first. After a while, they find themselves in front of a high-rise building. Su Lingli says that she is busy at work, so she asks Zheng Xuan to take care of the guy further and show him around the apartment. Zheng Xuan thinks it's problematic for everyone to live together, so he offers to rent a place for the guy to live. Su Lingli didn't like this information. She didn't understand what could be so valuable in her boyfriend's apartment that she even assumed that her boyfriend was going to take girls to the apartment while she was away. Zheng Xuan denied such claims by the girl and asked her to trust him. In fact, he never got around to telling his girlfriend that he was working as a hacker. Su Lingli didn't care about the guys anymore as she called her boss and informed him that she had just returned to the city and would be at work soon. The girl then explained that she had to go to work and left Zheng Xuan to look after Huang Ji. Zheng Xuan allocated the guy a room in their apartment absolutely free of charge. He then said that his room was next door, and if the guy needed anything, he could come and call him. Huang Ji asks Zheng Xuan not to worry as he is not going to give him any trouble. Zheng Xuan is glad that the guy understands. Huang Ji realizes that Zheng Xuan has his own secrets, and he also has his own secrets. So he thinks it would be good if they don't interfere with each other and each mind their own business. Huang Ji remembers that when they were driving home from the train station, he saw a bookstore, so he asks Zheng Xuan's permission to go there. Zheng Xuan doesn't mind such a request from the guy. After that, they went to the Xinhua bookstore. Zheng Xuan was a responsible guy and stayed close to Huang Ji, keeping an eye on him and what books Huang Ji was reading. Huang Ji was getting a little annoyed that Zheng Xuan was following him around and wouldn't give up. Huang Ji finally gives up and tells Zheng Xuan that he wants to sit and read for a while longer, but Zheng Xuan must have his own things to do. He promises that he will handle everything himself. Only after that, a tired Zheng Xuan decided to go home, which was nearby. He asked the guy to come home for dinner, but then he changed his mind and decided he would follow the guy to the bookstore himself. Huang Ji was glad that Zheng Xuan had stopped following him. After that, he finally decided to go after the thing he needed. After waiting for Zheng Xuan to leave the bookstore, Huang Ji went to the subway. After looking at the subway map, the guy found the city's mail sorting center. Soon, the guy was at the city mail sorting center. He came to the place to pick up his things and showed his ID card. Huang Ji said that his things from Huazhuang village were sent 2 days ago, and he was wondering if his things had already arrived. The man smilingly decided to check, and then reported that a few hours ago the items had arrived. Huang Ji thinks that the things are heavy, so he asks to rent a cart. After that, he rolled out with the cart to the street. On the street, he caught a cab and asked the driver to take him to the east side of the city, to the Platinum House. After getting into the cab, Huang Ji was glad that he sent the money suitcase away before leaving. It would have been incredibly hard for him to carry such a heavy bag by himself. Since the money had arrived, he was now going to find an apartment. I wonder how he would be allowed to do something like this by Su Lingli. I'm curious as to how the author of the manhwa decided to come up with such a thing. I have a large number of questions as the story progresses. How did people assume the guy was a genius if he only put together a laptop that had been taken apart before? How did he manage to mail $3 million? Postal parcels are no longer inspected in China, and it's free to mail anything you want, including such a large sum of money. How can he avoid the scrutiny of the tax authorities when a poor guy from the countryside suddenly rents a nice apartment in the city? I haven't yet taken into account that the author feels like he has absolutely no idea what such a disease implies, which the author gave the guy. Zheng Xuan took the guy in to live with him for free, albeit at Su Lingli's request. Su Lingli and Zheng Xuan took responsibility for the guy given his problem. Zheng Xuan looked after the guy quite responsibly and didn't let him go alone in an unfamiliar city. Huang Ji, on the other hand, is acting like a real ungrateful pig. They gave him a room for free in the apartment, took him out of the village under their own responsibility, knowing about his problems. Besides, the young couple has their own life, and the guy takes and resents, and he is not happy with the close attention. There are too many conventions in this manhwa that one has to turn a blind eye to. Such conventions in manhwa should have been finalized, as the idea itself doesn't seem outright bad. These are only a small part of the questions that arise when reading this manhwa. What if the author of the story is actually implying that Huang Ji made up all the events and they are only happening in his head? What if the guy is actually so seriously ill that he made up a separate world where he is a superhero? Then it's actually a very sad story. Plus, it explains all the inconsistencies in the plot, since the guy just didn't know about all these things in the world. Soon, Huang Ji reached the high-rise building that was known as the Platinum House. Upon entering the lobby of the building, the guy found that there was no one there. So he wondered loudly if there was anyone in the place. Suddenly, a girl came out to the noise and was surprised that there were guests in the house. The guy immediately got excited and said that he had already talked to the girl on the phone about wanting to rent an apartment in the Platinum House. The girl recalled the guy calling her and that the guy had told her on the phone that he wanted to rent an apartment with 4 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. Huang Ji confirmed his rental offer and asked if there was any problem with that, given the tone of the girl's voice. The girl didn't question further and went to walk the guy to the proposed apartment. The girl couldn't help but wonder where such a poor guy got the money from, but despite the questions that arose in her mind, she didn't ask them. Huang Ji thought that he was mistaken for a poor man because of his clothes, and that clothes are also important when first thinking about a person. Soon the girl led the guy to one of the apartments. She inquired how he liked the apartment. The girl also pointed out that this apartment was not only spacious, but the light and ventilation were in excellent condition. After noting the pros of the apartment, the girl announced the price of 5,000 yuan per month. She also mentioned that the price would increase next season. From the looks of it, the apartment was obviously not in the best condition, and the girl obviously brought the guy to this apartment because she thought he didn't have the money for a decent apartment. Huang Ji extracted the information from the apartment, and it turned out that no one had stayed in the apartment for 7 months. To make matters worse, the apartment was cold and damp, there were a lot of mosquitoes, and a man had died in that apartment. The guy, who has been in the village all his life, immediately noticed that the apartment was disgusting. He noted that the girl was doing a very good job, but he knew that a person had died in the apartment and that no one had lived in the apartment for several months. The girl had not yet had time to comprehend the words said by the guy, as he immediately noted that there is a better apartment upstairs and asked to show it. The girl is shocked by such a proposal. In her thoughts, she only remembers that in that apartment there were additional services, so the guy should not have known about it. Huang Ji, like someone who had recently won the lottery, immediately took out a wad of money and boasted that he was holding 100,000 yuan and asked the girl to show another apartment. The girl couldn't refuse the money, so she immediately took the 100,000 yen and was going to do everything. She even somehow decided that the guy in front of her was some cool businessman, and that's why he had so much money with him and had information about the Platinum House. Having led him to the door of a nice apartment, the girl asked if the guy was satisfied with the apartment. She even offered to go inside the apartment with him and help him relax. However, the guy closed the door right in front of her face and refused her services. The girl was not desperate and decided to look for another victim for her services. Surely this is a Platinum House and not a house located in the red light district. Taking a seat on the bed, the guy was glad that a temporary abode had been found. After that, he proceeded to purchase a computer. Soon there were many couriers outside the Platinum House. One of them asked if they were all carrying computer parts. Someone said he was carrying a printer. One of the couriers was, because he doesn't know anything about computers, and the customer specified not only the model needed, but also the shopping center where everything could be purchased. The courier was pleased with such professionalism of the customer. The couriers reached the door to the guy's apartment, and the guy greeted them happily. The girl at this time looked out from around the corner. She was wondering why so many couriers and such a large number of boxes had appeared. Once the couriers brought everything into the apartment, Huang Ji started to assemble the computer. Soon he had assembled everything he originally wanted and stood happily looking at the result of his work. He had never used a computer before, so he was a little worried about whether or not he would be able to do it. Without hesitation, he sat down at the computer and started looking for information. He had a big gap between theory and practice, so he had to get used to it. However, as soon as he sat down at the computer, he immediately got a headache from the large amount of information he received. Finally, the guy typed in a search engine query about aliens. However, the guy was in for a big disappointment, because he had only familiarized himself with what nonsense could be on the internet. Aliens versus Godzilla, an alien media company, an alien router. All of this information was strange to the guy. After a little thought, he decided to search by keywords: aliens, space, moon. Luck had finally smiled on him, or at least he thought so. He came across information that aliens were on the backside of the moon and that a spaceship was moored on the moon. He also found information that the United States had seen a UFO on the moon. The guy was surprised and pleased that so many people like him believed in the existence of aliens. He was surprised that even though people didn't have his abilities, they were still able to detect the aliens from the traces left behind. Huang Ji found that a user under the nickname Nami Nitro Gold had posted a lot of content related to aliens. For example, Nami Nitro Gold wondered about whether aliens have always been on the side of humanity. He also wondered if there was an alien base on the moon. Although Huang Ji thought that all the information was hidden and the American astronauts could already see everything, Huang Ji wondered how Nami Nitro Gold could know the secret information then. Huang Ji decided to check Nami Nitro Gold and found that Dong'an was currently using the computer in Cafe 112 and that his funds were 15 yuan. Huang Ji complained that the information through the network was limited and it was necessary to meet face-to-face. All of this was not surprising, since the guy couldn't even recognize Piccolo. Huang Ji was surprised that Nami Nitro Gold didn't use his own identity card, but someone else's found on the internet. The guy came to the conclusion that since Nami Nitro Gold was a minor, he could hide like this. So he decided to write Nami Nitro Gold in private messages first. It's entirely possible that they'll both be taken to a psychiatric hospital in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, Nami Nitro Gold still hadn't answered the guy. He thought that things would continue like this, then dinner would come and he would have to go home. The guy decided not to wait any longer and added Nami Nitro Gold as a friend. However, when sending a friendship request, a key question was asked. According to it, the guy had to answer the question, "What is Nami Nitro Gold's favorite game?" The omniscient and all-knowing Huang Ji failed to do so and was denied friendship. Huang Ji became furious as he couldn't understand why he was denied friendship. Since Nami Nitro Gold didn't want to accept him, he decided to log in from Nami Nitro Gold's account and send a friend request to himself. Huang Ji then wrote to Nami Nitro Gold saying that he had some ideas about aliens that he would like to discuss. However, Nami Nitro Gold strongly disliked this approach. He started hurling insults in the guy's direction, and also asked the hacker to get off his back. After all, even if the guy had added him as a friend, it didn't mean that he would communicate with him. It was even funny to him that the guy was asking him about aliens. Huang Ji was even surprised because it turns out that on the internet, people communicate in such a way, like Nami Nitro Gold. Huang Ji didn't stop there and asked Nami Nitro Gold to shut up. He said that he wanted to ask Nami Nitro Gold for information that was interesting to him and asked Nami Nitro Gold to answer honestly. Then the guy threatened that he knew Nami Nitro Gold very well and dictated his number. Nami Nitro Gold immediately said that he was too young and asked the uncle not to get hot. Huang Ji was upset because it seems that he was wrong about the guy and he doesn't know anything. However, he didn't stop there and decided to try again, offering Nami Nitro Gold to talk via video call. It's usually after such calls from uncles to teenagers that the police are reported. Once Huang Ji contacted the guy via video call, then Nami Nitro Gold wondered why he was seeing the guy. Huang Ji, on the other hand, told the guy not to ask any questions. It seems that he decided to call himself Nami Nitro Gold because of his hair. It turns out that Huang Ji can't get information about the person on the other side through video and voice, because what he sees now is just an electromagnetic signal broadcast seen on a screen that doesn't match the conditions for seeing and hearing directly. Huang Ji immediately told the guy that he saw he post on the internet about aliens. He was curious as to why the guy thought such a thing and what his reasoning was. Huang Ji was curious how the guy knew that American astronauts had seen aliens. Nami Nitro Gold brags that he found all these secrets in secret FBI files. He also revealed the information that aliens destroyed the Challenger. Nami Nitro Gold doesn't stop there and tells the guy that the aliens have reached an agreement with the United States to help develop weapons and that there is an underground base in Area 51. Huang Ji felt increasingly enlightened by such valuable knowledge. However, he was very upset when Nami Nitro Gold began to tell him that the United States had not landed on the moon, and that all the live broadcasts from that year had been filmed in advance. Nami Nitro Gold even asks to point out that there is no water on the moon, and he then wonders where such clear footprints came from, and other than that, there should be no shadow. It finally reached Huang Ji that the guy in front of him will not give him any useful information and is talking nonsense, so Huang Ji turned off the computer. The guy had long known about the astronauts landing on the moon and that it was pure truth. Now he needed to go back to the bookstore as soon as possible. Soon, Zheng Xuan returned to the bookstore after work. He informed that it was time for dinner and came to walk the guy home. Huang Ji picked up a whole stack of books from the bookstore that Zheng Xuan was even surprised by this, and that the guy likes to read so much. Huang Ji decided to put aside the alien matter for now and focus on gaining more knowledge first. He lacked even basic knowledge, so he needed to catch up as soon as possible. The guy began to study diligently, as if he was making intensive preparations for Gaokao. After reading a book, he immediately internalized the material, not even needing to read a second time. He hadn't been very good at reading books before. Recalling them was a waste of his ability to absorb information. Any information he read or learned was automatically stored in his mind. It was basically like a photographic memory, only in an enhanced form. Even if he lost his memory, he was sure that he would be able to recover all the information stored in his head almost immediately. Besides, he not only memorized all the information, but could also put it into practice. This ability set him apart from other people who took a long time to learn something. What a wonderful ability! The author himself probably admired people with photographic memory and dreamed of an improved version of such a human ability. However, the guy realized that knowledge should be constantly updated, not dust on the shelf. He used to know the word gravity, but he had not systematically studied the corresponding theory of cognition, so he could not get information about the gravity of an object. Looking at the cabinet, Huang Ji immediately realized that the gravity it was subjected to was 2,905.251 thousandths. He didn't even need to calculate the formula because he could see at a glance how much gravity the object was subjected to. However, if the cabinet was placed in a different place, the gravity would become different, but even such differences could not escape his eyes. After that, Huang Ji decided to learn the basics of physics. The basics of physics would not only allow him to gain more information and strengthen his understanding of the brain through learning, but also explore the possibilities of his abilities further, so learning was necessary for him. The next day, Zheng Xuan left his room and complained that he had been up half the night again. He knocked on Huang Ji's room and said that it was already time for breakfast. However, Huang Ji was already awake and informed that he had already had breakfast and that his door was unlocked, and Zheng Xuan could enter the room. When Zheng Xuan approached him, he saw his textbooks and asked him how he was doing in his studies. Huang Ji admitted that he had not read much in the past, so he had to catch up urgently. Zheng Xuan asks the guy to study hard and strive to succeed in the future so as not to let his grandfather down. He said that he had important things to do in the morning, but he was going to take the guy to school in the afternoon to look around. Once Zheng Xuan left the room, then the guy admits that he had already finished reading a book on mechanical engineering in one evening, but he couldn't tell Zheng Xuan about it. While sorting through the books, he remembered that he had thought about practicing medicine, but as it turned out, it was a very expensive occupation, and he had already spent quite a lot, so he decided that he would only read books for now. Digging through the boxes, he found a book on the basics of traditional Chinese medicine. Although modern Western medicine already had a complete research system on the human body, if he looked at it from the perspective of traditional Chinese medicine, the mysteries of the human body were limitless. He was able to learn from the book that the existing set of traditional Chinese medicine was called 409 acupuncture points, but only half of the acupuncture points were being used. There were quite a few points not yet discovered. Besides the 12th, 15th, and 8th meridians, the guy could recognize 9 hidden meridians as well as more than 20 side meridians. Among them, it would be better for him to study the hidden meridians. In the book, there were major veins, and the location of acupuncture points was constantly changing. As it turns out, over the centuries people have gradually forgotten that qi and blood should interact together, and that's why people often get sick. He even noticed that one meridian is mainly responsible for transmitting neuroelectrochemical signals from 5 internal organs and 6 other indicators, and that it is the very real platform for controlling the human body. After learning this information, he decided to think about how athletes were better than regular people. If one thought of muscles, then this answer was wrong. Huang Ji realized that it was all about endurance internal organs. If the muscles were to tense up abruptly, it would put a huge strain on the human body. However, if one integrates a powerful visceral system, it will help to quickly strengthen and stimulate all aspects of human body functions, such as nutrition, blood supply, detoxification, immunity, and body fluid regulation. To Huang Ji, this internal force seemed very powerful. For precise coordination and control, the only method that can be used at present is acupuncture and cauterization. However, the guy felt that this method was not very convenient because some acupuncture points were hidden in very strange places and he couldn't reach them with one hand. There were even some acupuncture points that were hidden between important organs and bones that couldn't be reached by acupuncture and cauterization. There were only 2 places a guy could start. One controlled the blood supply system and the other stimulated growth. They were all very practical acupuncture points. Deciding not to delay any longer, the guy took off his shirt and decided to treat the Yunmen, Zhongfu, and Tianqi points. After all, these acupuncture points were used as landmarks. However, it wasn't as easy as he originally thought, and it was incredibly hard for him. He had developed shortness of breath. A problem appeared in his blood vessels that he couldn't understand anything about. He needed to fix his position so that he wouldn't miss again, especially since he only had one try. Trying again, he could feel the fat deposits burning intensely and also that his lungs were expanding. Every organ in his body began to grow. He had to change his posture but try to contain the pain. Do not repeat never after this genius, and also having read something once from the book, immediately do it, because it can harm your health and lead to very sad consequences. After changing his position, he felt that he wanted to sleep and finally gave up and decided that he could rest. After a while, Huang Ji felt that his heart and lungs had grown, which made him very happy. However, in exchange, 5 years of his life were taken away from him. The guy was surprised that 5 years had been taken from his life and made the assumption that he had injected toxins. In addition, he noticed that his liver and kidneys had not grown. Only now did he realize that maybe his store of knowledge wasn't enough and that there must be some other way to cleanse the body without acupuncture and cauterization. Is he going to be a space marine? Just at this moment, Zheng Xuan called the guy out for lunch. So quickly the time flew by from breakfast to lunch. After lunch, Huang Ji went with Zheng Xuan to the school building. Zheng Xuan showed the guy where he would be studying before classes started. He good-naturedly decided to show everything to the kid in this school. The first thing he did was to show the guy the cafe where he used to go before. After taking a closer look at the school, Huang Ji disappointedly noticed that the school didn't have famous teachers or advanced academics. This school was basically categorized as a fee-based school. He was even sorry that he wouldn't be able to dive into his student life. But most of all, he didn't want to waste such a precious resource he had, time, especially since he had recently taken 5 years of his life. Suddenly, Zheng Xuan called Su Lingli because she wanted to go shopping. However, the guy reminded her that he was showing the school to Huang Ji. Huang Ji, hearing the conversation, asks not to worry about him, and that let the guy go out with Su Lingli. Huang Ji confesses that he has already memorized the way and that he can handle it all by himself. It's usually after such convincing words that some disaster happens. Zheng Xuan decided to believe the guy, but asked him to call him immediately if anything happens. After freeing himself from Zheng Xuan's scrutiny, the guy decided to verify the information. A short time later, he returned to his apartment in the Platinum House. This time, he assured himself that he had learned his lesson and would not fall for any more scams. He decided to search the internet for information on how to stimulate acupuncture points throughout the body without acupuncture or cauterization. Suddenly, he saw the answer to his question, for someone was offering to teach him how to practice martial arts. Huang Ji was surprised when he saw the information about martial arts. Incidentally, just less than a minute ago, he had assured that he would not fall for the tricks of scammers again. Just how deep will the guy go in his research, and when will he already have a phone conversation with the real scammers who will tell him that all is not well with his grandfather? I take back what I said earlier. After reading the beginning of the story in the novel, I understood the story a little better than when I read the manhwa. They oversimplify things in the manhwa, so there are even more questions than when you read the novel. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you would like to see a sequel, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave your wishes in the comments. You can also subscribe to Telegram to know about new videos. Bye everybody.